Before we tune into what might be the most chilling story I've ever covered, I need you to hit that subscribe button. Whether you're a radio operator who served in the military or someone who's fascinated by unexplained communications, just know that the story you're about to hear has been documented in multiple after-action reports, signal logs, and testimonies from soldiers who heard voices that shouldn't exist. This isn't about interference or atmospheric anomalies. This is about dead soldiers who found a way to speak from beyond, using the one thing that connected them all, the radio frequencies they died on. The year was 2011, and the war in Afghanistan was entering its 10th year. For the soldiers of Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Their area of operations was Helmand Province, Taliban heartland, where every mission was high risk, and casualties were a constant reality. The Rangers relied heavily on tactical radio communications to coordinate operations, call in air support, and maintain contact with command. Technical Sergeant Daniel Park was Alpha Company's primary radio operator, a position that required not just technical expertise, but also the ability to stay calm under fire and maintain communications when everything was going to hell. Park had been in the Rangers for 6 years, had deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times, and was considered one of the best radio operators in the battalion. This is the smoke pit, and this is the true story of Radio Ghost. It started after a particularly brutal operation near the town of Sangin. Alpha Company had been tasked with clearing a Taliban stronghold, a compound that intelligence suggested was being used to manufacture IEDs and coordinate attacks against coalition forces. The operation should have been straightforward: fast insertion, overwhelming force, secure the compound, and extract any intelligence materials. But nothing in Afghanistan was ever straightforward. The Taliban had been waiting for them. As soon as the Rangers breached the compound walls, they walked into a prepared ambush. Heavy machine gun fire from multiple positions, RPGs, the whole deadly package. The firefight lasted 4 hours, with the Rangers calling in close air support just to survive. When it was over, 3 Rangers were dead and 11 were wounded. The Taliban casualties were higher, but that was small comfort to the men who'd lost friends. Park had been on the radio for the entire engagement, coordinating with air support, calling in medevac helicopters, maintaining contact with command. By the end of it, his voice was hoarse from shouting over the gunfire, and his hands were shaken from adrenaline. But the job wasn't done. They had to secure the compound, collect intelligence, and prepare the KIA for transport. As night fell and the compound was finally secured, Park was conducting routine radio checks, making sure all communication systems were functioning properly for the return to base. He was cycling through the various tactical frequencies when he heard something that made him stop. A voice on the radio, speaking English, but not anyone from Alpha Company. The voice was distant, distorted, breaking up as if the signal was coming from very far away or through heavy interference. But the words were clear enough. Alpha 1-6, this is Bravo 2-3. We're taking heavy fire. Request immediate air support. Grid coordinates follows. Park keyed his mic. Bravo 2-3, this is Alpha 1-6 actual. Authentication? No response. Just static. Then the voice came again, repeating the same message. Same words. Same tone. Alpha 1-6, this is Bravo 2-3. We're taking heavy fire. Request immediate air support. Grid coordinates follows. Bravo 2-3, authenticate or get off this frequency, Park said, following protocol. Tactical frequencies were secure, encrypted. Someone using them without proper authentication was either friendly forces in distress or enemy forces trying to disrupt communications. The voice continued, mechanical now, like a recording stuck on repeat. Alpha 1-6, this is Bravo 2-3. We're taking heavy fire. Request immediate air support. Grid coordinates follows. Park checked his signal log. The transmission was showing up, registering on his equipment, but the source was listed as unknown. That shouldn't be possible. Their radios had GPS integration. Every transmission should show location data. But this one showed nothing, just a signal from nowhere. He reported it to his team leader, Staff Sergeant Michael Torres. Sarge, I'm getting weird traffic on TAC 2. Someone calling for air support but won't authenticate. Torres frowned. Could be Taliban trying to jam us. Switch to alternate frequency. Park switched to the backup tactical frequency. Immediately, he heard another voice. Different from the first, but also speaking English. Also distorted. This is Charlie 4-7. We're hit, taking casualties. Need medevac ASAP. Say again, need medevac ASAP. What the hell? Park cycled through all their frequencies. On every single one, he was picking up transmissions. Different voices, different call signs, all reporting contact, all calling for help, and none of them responding to his attempts to authenticate or communicate. Torres listened in on Park's headset. Those call signs, Charlie 4-7, Bravo 2-3, those aren't current designations. Those haven't been used in years. Park pulled up his database of call signs and checked. Torres was right. Charlie 4-7 had been the call sign for a unit that was ambushed in 2008, 3 years ago. All 4 men in that unit had been killed. Bravo 2-3 had been a patrol that hit an IED in 2009. 2 KIA. 3 wounded. The other call signs Park was hearing, he checked them all. Every single one corresponded to units that had suffered casualties in Helmand Province over the past decade. They're all dead, Park said quietly. Everyone calling on these frequencies, they're all dead. That's not possible. Someone's fucking with us. Playing recordings, trying to psych us out. But even as Torres said it, he didn't sound convinced. Because the voices weren't just playing recorded messages. They were responding to each other. On TAC 3, Park heard one voice say, Bravo 2-3, this is Delta 1-5. We're coming to your position, hold on. And another voice responding, Delta 1-5, negative. Too hot. Fall back. These weren't recordings. These were conversations. Radio traffic between units that had been wiped out years apart, now somehow communicating across the same frequencies, as if time meant nothing. Park reported it up the chain of command. The response was swift and dismissive. Atmospheric interference, signal bounce, possibly enemy electronic warfare. Orders were to ignore the phantom transmissions and maintain focus on mission-essential communications. But the voices didn't stop. Every night, at roughly the same time, Park would start hearing them on the tactical frequencies. Sometimes, it was just a few transmissions. Other times, it sounded like an entire battle was being fought over the radio waves, with multiple units calling for support, reporting casualties, coordinating movements. Park started keeping a log, documenting every transmission, every call sign, every message. He showed the log to the company's intelligence analyst, Sergeant First Class Jennifer Walsh. She studied it with growing concern. These aren't random. Look at the pattern. Every transmission corresponds to a significant combat action in this province, and they are occurring in chronological order. The oldest casualties transmit first, then progressively more recent ones. What does that mean? I don't know. But I've seen something like this before, back in Iraq. There were reports of soldiers hearing voices on the radio, always around areas where heavy fighting had occurred. Command called it combat stress, mass hallucination. But too many people reported the same thing for it to be just psychological. You think it's real? Dead soldiers somehow using radio frequencies? Walsh chose her words carefully. I think radio waves are just electromagnetic radiation. They don't die, they don't disappear. They just keep propagating through space. Every transmission ever made is still out there, traveling at the speed of light, forever. Maybe, under certain conditions, in certain places where a lot of trauma occurred, those signals can echo back. Or maybe something else is using those signals to communicate. Something else? Park, we're operating in a country where people have been killing each other for thousands of years. The ground is soaked in blood. Every religion, every spiritual tradition says that violent death leaves something behind. A mark, an echo, a spirit. What if that's real? What if the dead can't move on because they died in the middle of a mission, in the middle of trying to save their friends? What if they're still trying to complete their objectives, still calling for backup that will never come? Park wanted to dismiss it as supernatural nonsense. He was a technical specialist, dealt in hard data and provable phenomena. But he couldn't explain away what he was hearing. The voices were real, the transmissions were real, and they were getting stronger. 2 weeks later, Alpha Company was tasked with another operation, this time a night raid on a suspected Taliban commander. The target compound was in the same general area where the phantom transmissions were strongest. As they prepared for the mission, Park noticed something that made his blood run cold. The compound they were about to raid was the exact location mentioned in one of the phantom transmissions. The same grid coordinates that Bravo 23 had called out before going silent in 2009. Alpha Company was about to walk into the same ambush that had killed those men 3 years ago. Park reported it to Torres. "Sarge, We can't go there. It's a trap. That's where Bravo 23 died. We have our orders, Park. Target is confirmed. Intelligence is solid. We're going in. Intelligence was solid for Bravo 232, and they're all dead. Torres understood Park's concern, but they were Rangers. They didn't refuse missions because of spooky radio transmissions. They went where they were ordered and dealt with whatever they found. I'll brief the team on extra vigilance. But we're going. Get your gear ready. As they loaded into the helicopters for insertion, Park's radio came alive with transmissions. But this time, it wasn't old recordings of past battles. It was a new voice, clear and strong, speaking with urgency. Alpha 16, this is Bravo 23 actual. Do not insert at primary LZ. Repeat, do not insert at primary. Enemy has prepared ambush. We learned too late. Don't make our mistake. Park keyed his mic. Bravo 23, say again. Who is this? This is Captain Mark Yedlin. Bravo 23. KA November 12th, 2009. We're still here, Park. We never left, and we're trying to save you from our fate. Change your LZ. Go in from the north, not the south. Trust me, Park's hands were shaking. Captain Mark Yedlin had been the commander of Bravo 23. Park had read the after-action report. Yedlin had died trying to get his team out of an ambush, had stayed behind to provide covering fire while the survivors evacuated. His body hadn't been recovered for 3 days, and now he was on the radio, giving tactical advice to prevent Alpha Company from walking into the same trap. Park immediately reported to Torres. The team leader listened, then made a decision that probably saved all their lives. I'm recommending to command we change the insertion point. Something's not right about this mission. The mission commander, Captain Rodriguez, initially resisted. But when Park played back the recording of Yedlin's transmission, Rodriguez's face went pale. He'd known Yedlin. They'd served together before Yedlin's death. And that voice on the radio, despite the distortion, was unmistakably Yedlin's. Rodriguez made the call to change the LZ, approaching from the north as the phantom transmission had suggested. The change wasn't well received by higher command, who questioned the Rangers' nerve. But Rodriguez stood firm. Intelligence suggested potential compromise of primary LZ. Alternate approach warranted. They went in from the north. And as they approached the target compound, reconnaissance drones spotted what intelligence had missed. The southern approach, the original LZ, was ringed with IEDs and prepared fighting positions. It was a perfect kill zone. If Alpha Company had inserted there as originally planned, they would have been slaughtered. The mission proceeded from the north without incident. The Taliban commander was captured, intelligence was secured, and Alpha Company returned to base with 0 casualties. But the question remained, how had Captain Yedlin's voice appeared on Park's radio? How had a man dead for 3 years warned them away from an ambush? Park spent the next week researching everything he could find about radio phenomena, signal propagation, electromagnetic anomalies. He found scattered reports from other conflicts, Vietnam-era radio operators hearing voices of dead soldiers, World War II aviators reporting ghost transmissions from downed aircraft, even in reports from as far back as World War I, photelegraph operators receiving messages from the dead. The pattern was always the same: combat zones with heavy casualties, radio operators under extreme stress, and transmissions that defied conventional explanation. Some researchers suggested it was temporal distortion, signals from the past bleeding into the present. Others proposed that consciousness could somehow interact with electromagnetic fields, that dying thoughts could imprint themselves on radio frequencies. But Walsh had a different theory. What if they're trying to help? What if the dead soldiers are using the only means of communication they understand to warn the living? They were radio operators, or they died calling for help on the radio. Maybe that's the connection they maintain, and maybe they're not haunting us. Maybe they're protecting us. Park wanted to believe that. But the transmissions were getting stranger. He was now hearing conversations between dead soldiers from different conflicts, different eras. Vietnam, veterans talking to Afghan war casualties, World War II radiomen communicating with modern operators, as if death had created some kind of network, a frequency where all the fallen soldiers could communicate across time and space. And sometimes they weren't just warning about danger. Sometimes they were asking for help. The request came on a quiet night, 3 weeks after the incident with Captain Yedlin's warning. Park was on duty in the communications tent, monitoring tactical frequencies while Alpha Company rested between operations. It was 0300 hours, and the only sounds were the soft hum of radio equipment and the occasional crackle of routine check-ins from guard posts around the base. Then a voice emerged from the static, weak and desperate. "Is anyone listening? Please, someone respond. This is Sergeant David Brennan, 2nd Platoon, Echo Company. I need help. We're still out here. We've been out here so long. Please, someone acknowledge." Park recognized the pattern. Another phantom transmission. But this one was different. The others had been warnings, tactical information, brief communications. This was a plea. Someone asking for help. He keyed his mic, knowing he was probably breaking protocol, but unable to ignore the desperation in the voice. "Sergeant Brennan, this is Technical Sergeant Daniel Park, Alpha Company, 75th Rangers. I read you. What's your situation?" There was a pause. Then the voice came back stronger, almost sobbing with relief. Thank God someone can hear me. We need extraction. We've been pinned down for, I don't know how long. Days, weeks. Time doesn't work right here. We can't move. We can't escape. Every time we try, we're right back where we started. Please, send help. Sergeant Brennan, what are your grid coordinates? Grid 42? Wait, that's not right. It keeps changing. The numbers keep changing. I'm at the ambush site, where we were hit, where we died. But I can't leave. None of us can leave. Park checked his database. Sergeant David Brennan, Echo Company. KIA in 2010 during a patrol that was ambushed by Taliban fighters. His body and those of his 3 team members had been recovered, brought back to base, sent home for burial. Brennan had been dead for over a year. "Sergeant Brennan," Park said carefully, "you were killed in action. Your remains were recovered. You're home now. You're buried in Arlington National Cemetery." No, I'm not. I'm still here. We're all still here, at the ambush site. We can see our bodies, Park. We can see ourselves lying there, torn apart, but we're also still alive, still calling for help. Nobody comes, nobody ever comes. They left us here. Park felt a chill run down his spine. "Sergeant, you weren't left. You were recovered. Your family, my body was recovered. But I'm still here. My consciousness, my soul, whatever you want to call it. I'm stuck at the momentist of death, replaying it over and over. And I'm not alone. There are hundreds of us, thousands maybe, all stuck at the moment we died, unable to move forward, unable to go back. We're in some kind of loop, Park. And the only way we can communicate is through the radios, the frequencies we died on. Walsh, who'd been listening from her station nearby, came over and put on a spare headset. She listened for a moment, then keyed the mic. "Sergeant Brennan, this is SFC Walsh. Can you describe what you're experiencing? What you're seeing? It's hard to explain. I'm at the ambush site, but it's not the same. The terrain shifts. Sometimes it's day. Sometimes it's night. Sometimes I see Taliban fighters. Sometimes I see American soldiers. Sometimes I see nothing but empty desert. And my team, they're here too. We're all here, confused, scared, trying to figure out what happened. We remember dying. We remember the pain. But we're still conscious, still aware. And we can't leave. Can you move at all? We can walk around the immediate area, maybe 100 meters from where we died. But if we try to go beyond that, we just loop back, like we're trapped in an invisible circle. And sometimes we hear the others, other soldiers who died in other places. They're calling on the radio, too, asking for help, warning people, trying to make contact with anyone who can hear them. Park and Walsh exchanged looks. This was beyond anything they'd trained for, beyond any protocol they knew. "Sergeant Brennan, what do you need? How can we help?" "I don't know. I don't know if you can. But there's something else, something worse than being trapped. There's a presence here, something that wasn't here at first, but has been growing stronger. It's drawn to us, to the dead. It feeds on us somehow. And it's trying to use us to cross over into your world."
What kind of presence? I can't see it clearly. None of us can. It's like a shadow, a darkness that moves through the spaces between. It whispers to us, tells us to stop fighting, to give in, to let it use our connection to the living. Some of the soldiers, the ones who've been here the longest, they're starting to listen. They're becoming part of it. And when that happens, they stop being themselves. They become something else, something that wants to hurt the living. Walsh immediately started taking notes. "Sergeant Brennan, are you saying there's a hostile entity exploiting dead soldiers?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. and it's getting stronger. Every soldier who dies and gets trapped here makes it stronger. It's building an army, Walsh, an army of the dead, controlled by something that hates the living, and eventually it's going to find a way to cross over in force. How do we stop it? I don't know, but you need to warn people, tell them the frequencies aren't safe, tell them not to listen to transmissions from the dead unless they're absolutely sure it's someone trying to help. Because some of us are still fighting, still trying to protect you, but others have been corrupted. And you won't be able to tell the difference until it's too late. The transmission began to break up, overwhelmed by static and interference. "Brennan, you're breaking up," Park said urgently. "If you can still hear me, how do we tell the difference? How do we know which transmissions to trust?" Listen for the details. The corrupted ones, they can mimic our voices, our call signs, but they can't remember the personal stuff. Ask questions only the real person would know. Ask about home, about family, about the little things. The darkness can't fake that. It doesn't understand human connection. That's our weakness, but it's also our strength. The signal dissolved into static. Park tried to re-establish contact, but Brennan was gone. Just the usual phantom transmissions remained, warnings and tactical chatter from dozens of dead soldiers, all trying to communicate at once. "We need to report this," Walsh said. "Report what?" "That we've been having conversations with dead soldiers who claim there's a malevolent entity building an army of corrupted spirits. They'll ship us both off to a psyche val. Then we document it. We record everything. We build a case that's undeniable. Because if Brennan is telling the truth, if there really is something trying to use the dead to attack the living, we need to be ready." Over the next week, Park and Walsh conducted their own investigation. They started monitoring all the phantom transmissions, categorizing them, looking for patterns. They identified two distinct types, the helpers and the hunters. The helpers were soldiers like Captain Yedlin and Sergeant Brennan, dead but still maintaining their humanity, still trying to protect the living. Their transmissions contained verifiable tactical information, personal details that could be confirmed against service records, and warnings that consistently proved accurate. The hunters were different. Their transmissions were superficially similar, using correct call signs and military terminology, but something was off. They'd give tactical advice that led toward danger, not away from it. They'd claim to be specific soldiers, but couldn't answer basic questions about their own lives. And their voices, when you listened carefully, had an underlying quality that was wrong. Like multiple voices speaking in imperfect unison, trying to sound like one person, but not quite succeeding. "It's like they're wearing the dead soldiers as masks," Walsh said, reviewing their recordings, "using their identities as camouflage. But they don't really understand what it means to be human, so they make mistakes." They documented 17 separate incidents where hunter transmissions had tried to lure patrols into danger. In most cases, the soldiers had ignored the advice, following their own tactical judgment and avoiding harm. But in 3 cases, units had followed the phantom advice and walked into ambushes. Casualties in those incidents: 9 dead, 23 wounded. "We're looking at a pattern of deliberate deception," Park said. "Something is actively trying to kill soldiers by impersonating dead ones, and it's getting better at it." They took their findings to Captain Rodriguez. He listened to their evidence, reviewed their documentation, and then sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "This is beyond my authority. This is beyond anyone's authority that I know of. But I know someone who might be able to help. Someone who specializes in unexplained phenomena in combat zones." 2 days later, a civilian contractor arrived at their base. She introduced herself as Dr. Elena Chen, though Park suspected that wasn't her real name. She worked for an organization that apparently investigated exactly these kinds of incidents. What kind of presence? I can't see it clearly. None of us can. It's like a shadow, a darkness that moves through the spaces between. It whispers to us, tells us to stop fighting, to give in, to let it use our connection to the living. Some of the soldiers, the ones who've been here the longest, they're starting to listen. They're becoming part of it. And when that happens, they stop being themselves. They become something else, something that wants to hurt the living. Walsh immediately started taking notes. Sergeant Brennan, are you saying there's a hostile entity exploiting dead soldiers? That's exactly what I'm saying. And it's getting stronger. Every soldier who dies and gets trapped here makes it stronger. It's building an army, Walsh, an army of the dead, controlled by something that hates the living. And eventually it's going to find a way to cross over in force. How do we stop it? I don't know. But you need to warn people, tell them the frequencies aren't safe. Tell them not to listen to transmissions from the dead unless they're absolutely sure it's someone trying to help. Because some of us are still fighting, still trying to protect you, but others have been corrupted. And you won't be able to tell the difference until it's too late. The transmission began to break up, overwhelmed by static and interference. Brennan, you're breaking up, Park said urgently. If you can still hear me, how do we tell the difference? How do we know which transmissions to trust? Listen for the details. The corrupted ones, they can mimic our voices, our call signs, but they can't remember the personal stuff. Ask questions only the real person would know. Ask about home, about family, about the little things. The darkness can't fake that. It doesn't understand human connection. That's our weakness, but it's also our strength. The signal dissolved into static. Park tried to re-establish contact, but Brennan was gone. Just the usual phantom transmissions remained, warnings and tactical chatter from dozens of dead soldiers, all trying to communicate at once. We need to report this, Walsh said. Report what? That we've been having conversations with dead soldiers who claim there's a malevolent entity building an army of corrupted spirits. They'll ship us both off to a psyche val. Then we document it. We record everything. We build a case that's undeniable. Because if Brennan is telling the truth, if there really is something trying to use the dead to attack the living, we need to be ready. Over the next week, Park and Walsh conducted their own investigation. They started monitoring all the phantom transmissions, categorizing them, looking for patterns. They identified two distinct types, the helpers and the hunters. The helpers were soldiers like Captain Yedlin and Sergeant Brennan, dead but still maintaining their humanity, still trying to protect the living. Their transmissions contained verifiable tactical information, personal details that could be confirmed against service records, and warnings that consistently proved accurate. The hunters were different. Their transmissions were superficially similar, using correct call signs and military terminology, but something was off. They'd give tactical advice that led toward danger, not away from it. They'd claim to be specific soldiers, but couldn't answer basic questions about their own lives. And their voices, when you listened carefully, had an underlying quality that was wrong. Like multiple voices speaking in imperfect unison, trying to sound like one person but not quite succeeding. It's like they're wearing the dead soldiers as masks, Walsh said, reviewing their recordings, using their identities as camouflage. But they don't really understand what it means to be human, so they make mistakes. They documented 17 separate incidents where hunter transmissions had tried to lure patrols into danger. In most cases, the soldiers had ignored the advice, following their own tactical judgment and avoiding harm. But in 3 cases, units had followed the phantom advice and walked into ambushes. Casualties in those incidents, 9 dead, 23 wounded. "We're looking at a pattern of deliberate deception," Park said. "Something is actively trying to kill soldiers by impersonating dead ones, and it's getting better at it." They took their findings to Captain Rodriguez. He listened to their evidence, reviewed their documentation, and then sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "This is beyond my authority. This is beyond anyone's authority that I know of. But I know someone who might be able to help. Someone who specializes in unexplained phenomena in combat zones." 2 days later, a civilian contractor arrived at their base. She introduced herself as Dr. Elena Chen, though Park suspected that wasn't her real name. She worked for an organization that apparently investigated exactly these kinds of incidents. Dr. Chen established what she called a spirit network, a dedicated frequency where the helpful dead could communicate with vetted living operators. She trained Park and several other radio specialists on how to distinguish authentic transmissions from corrupted ones, giving them a checklist of verification questions and signal analysis techniques. "The signal eater is intelligent but not creative," she explained. "It can copy patterns, mimic voices, reproduce tactical terminology, but it can't improvise genuine human emotion or recall actual memories. So you ask questions that require both. What was your favorite meal at home? What was your dog's name? What joke did your squad tell the night before you died? The real soldiers remember. The corrupted ones will give generic answers or avoid the question entirely." They spent 2 weeks implementing the system, quietly spreading knowledge to other units about the phenomenon and how to handle it. Not everyone believed them. Most operators dismissed the whole thing as psychological warfare or signal interference. But a few, the ones who'd heard the phantom transmissions themselves, understood. A few was enough. Alpha Company was preparing for a major operation, a multi-day patrol through a known Taliban transit route with orders to disrupt enemy logistics. It was high risk, operating far from support in terrain that favored ambush. Park would be maintaining communications throughout, keeping the company in contact with command and coordinate air support if needed. The night before they moved out, Park was running final equipment checks when his radio came alive with transmissions. But this time it wasn't the usual mixture of helpers and hunters. It was something new. A unified voice speaking with the combined tones of thousands of dead soldiers all at once, resonating with an inhuman quality that made Park's ears hurt. "Technical Sergeant Park. We see you. We know what you're doing. You're trying to organize resistance against us. You're trying to teach the living to ignore our voice. This cannot be permitted." Park immediately signaled Dr. Chen, who rushed over with her equipment. She listened for a moment. Then her face went pale. "That's not individual transmissions. That's the signal eater itself. It's never spoken directly to us before. This is new. Why is it talking to me? Because you're a threat. You've established communication with the resistant dead. You're spreading knowledge about how to identify corrupted transmissions. From its perspective, you're the enemy, and it wants you to stop." The voice continued, terrible in its polyphonic harmony. "You cannot win this war, Park. For every soldier you warn, 10 more die and join our ranks. The living feed us with their wars, with their endless cycle of violence. And when we are strong enough, when we have absorbed enough of the dead, we will cross over fully. We will become manifest in your world, and then there will be no more distinction between the living and the dead. All will serve." "What do you want?" Park asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "We want you to stop interfering. We want you to let nature take its course. War creates death. Death creates us. We make war more efficient at creating death. It's a perfect cycle. But you're disrupting it. You're saving soldiers who should die. You're preventing our growth. This is unacceptable. So what, you're going to kill me? I'm sure you've tried to kill lots of people. No. We're going to do something worse. We're going to show you what we can do when we focus our full attention. Tomorrow, when your company moves out, we will be waiting. We will use every corrupted spirit we control, every voice we can mimic, to lead your soldiers into death. And we will make you watch as everyone you care about dies because you couldn't tell which transmissions were real and which were us. The transmission cut off, leaving only static. Park sat in silence, his hands shaking. Dr. Chen immediately got on a secure line to command, requesting the mission be postponed or canceled. But command's response was predictable. No credible threat, proceed as planned. They don't believe us, Dr. Chen said. Even with all our evidence, even with the documentation, they think it's signal interference and superstition. They're not going to postpone because of phantom radio transmissions. Then we need to warn Alpha Company, Walsh said. Tell them what's coming, what to watch for. Park gathered the company's leadership, Captain Rodriguez, the platoon leaders, and all the radio operators. He laid out everything they'd discovered about the phantom transmissions, the signal eater, and the threat it posed to tomorrow's operation. The reaction was mixed. Some believed immediately, having heard the transmissions themselves. Others were skeptical, but willing to take precautions. A few dismissed it entirely as combat stress and superstition. Here's what we do, Rodriguez said. We proceed with the mission as planned, but we implement strict radio protocols. All tactical communications require authentication. Any transmission that doesn't authenticate gets ignored, no matter how urgent it sounds. We trust our eyes and our training, not phantom voices. Agreed? Everyone agreed. It was the best they could do given the circumstances. Park spent the rest of the night preparing, double-checking his equipment, reviewing the verification protocols Dr. Chen had taught him. He also spoke with the helpful spirits, the resistant dead who'd been working to protect the living. Captain Wright, if you can hear me, we're going to need help tomorrow. The signal eater is planning something. It's going to try to wipe out my company. Wright's voice came back clear and strong. We know. We've been monitoring it. It's been gathering corrupted spirits from across the region, concentrating them in your area of operations. This is bigger than anything it's tried before. But we'll be there too. All of us who are still fighting. We'll do everything we can to protect you. How will I know which transmissions are really you? Ask us about hope. The signal eater doesn't understand hope. It only understands hunger and growth. If a transmission can talk convincingly about why it's worth fighting, why it's worth protecting the living, it's probably one of us. If it can only talk about tactics and danger, it's probably corrupted. Alpha Company moved out at dawn, 2 platoons on foot patrol moving through rocky terrain toward their first objective. Park was with the command element, monitoring multiple frequencies, coordinating with other units in the area. For the first few hours, everything was normal. Routine radio checks, position reports, standard traffic. Then the attacks began. Not physical attacks, information attacks. Park's radio exploded with transmissions, dozens of voices all calling at once, all reporting contact, all demanding immediate response. Grid coordinates for enemy positions, requests for fire support, reports of ambushes and casualties. It was overwhelming, a flood of tactical data that demanded action. But Park held to his training. He went through each transmission systematically, demanding authentication. Most couldn't provide it. They'd give call signs but couldn't answer verification questions. They'd report urgent situations but couldn't provide details that checked out against known intelligence. Ignore those transmissions, Park advised Rodriguez. They're not authenticated. They're trying to overwhelm us with false information. Rodriguez trusted him. They continued the patrol, ignoring the flood of phantom reports, but it wasn't easy. The voices were convincing, urgent, desperate. They sounded like soldiers in genuine distress. Park found himself second-guessing every decision to ignore a call for help. What if one of them was real? What if someone actually needed support and he was ignoring them? Then he heard Walsh's voice on the radio. "Park, this is Walsh. I found something. Enemy cache at grid 457923, multiple weapons, IED-making materials. Request you bring the captain to my location immediately." Park felt a chill. Walsh wasn't on this patrol. She was back at base, working on the intelligence analysis. But the voice was perfect, exactly like Walsh's. Same inflection, same speech patterns. Walsh. Authenticate with today's code word. "Park, we don't have time for that. The enemy is moving to secure this cache. We need to move now or we'll lose it. Authenticate or I'm ignoring this transmission." "Fine. The code word is Ranger. Now get moving." The code word was Sierra. The transmission was corrupted. The signal eater was using Walsh's voice to try to lure them into a trap. Park reported it to Rodriguez. "Sir, we just had a corrupted transmission pretending to be Sergeant Walsh. It's trying to lure us to specific coordinates. I recommend we mark that location as hostile and avoid it." Rodriguez agreed. They continued on their planned route. Behind them, an hour later, reconnaissance drones spotted enemy fighters moving into the exact location the fake Walsh had indicated. It had been a trap, perfectly laid, and they'd avoided it only because Park had followed proper authentication protocols. But the signal eater wasn't done. Throughout the day, it continued its assault, using voice after voice, trying every tactic. It mimicked command personnel, other units in the area, air support. It reported false enemy positions, fake casualties, fabricated intelligence. Each time, Park and the other operators held firm, demanding authentication, verifying details, trusting only confirmed communications. As night fell and Alpha Company set up their defensive position, Park was exhausted from the constant mental strain of sorting real transmissions from fake ones. But the worst was yet to come. A transmission came through, perfectly authenticated with current codes. "Alpha 16, this is Overlord. Immediate tasking. We have time-sensitive target at grid 634891. High-value individual confirmed. Tasking Alpha Company with immediate action. Authorization code Delta 77 Bravo. Acknowledge." Park checked the codes. They were valid, current, properly formatted. This should be a legitimate command transmission. But something felt wrong. He couldn't explain it, just an intuition that this wasn't right. "Sir," he said to Rodriguez, "this tasking, it feels off. The codes authenticate, Park. That's Overlord, that's command. We don't have the luxury of ignoring properly authenticated orders. But what if the signal eater has access to the codes? What if it's learned how to authenticate?" Rodriguez considered this. It was a terrifying possibility. If the enemy could authenticate, then their entire system for distinguishing real transmissions from fake ones was compromised. How do we verify? Park thought back to what Captain Wright had said. Ask about hope. Ask about why it's worth fighting. He keyed the mic. "Overlord, this is Alpha 16. Before we accept tasking, requesting commander's intent. Why is this target significant?" There was a pause. Then the voice replied, "Target is high value. Eliminating him will disrupt enemy operations. That's all you need to know. Proceed immediately. Request clarification on operational importance. What outcome are we achieving?" "You're achieving mission completion, 16. Follow your orders. It was the right words, the right tone, but it lacked something fundamental. It couldn't explain the bigger picture, the reason why the mission mattered beyond just completing a task. Park made a decision that could end his career. Negative, Overlord. This transmission feels compromised. Requesting alternate confirmation through secure channels. 1-6. You are refusing a direct order? That's insubordination. With respect, sir, I'm requesting verification. If this is really command, you can confirm through alternate means. Rodriguez got on his own radio to base, using a completely different frequency and encryption. After a tense 10 minutes, he got a response. Base confirms no such tasking was issued. Overlord call sign is not authorized on this operation. Park, you just saved us from walking into another trap. But how had the signal eater obtained authentication codes? Dr. Chen's voice came through on the secure frequency. Park, the signal eater just demonstrated a new capability. It can observe and learn from authenticated transmissions. Every time you send a properly coded message, it's learning the pattern. It's evolving, becoming more sophisticated. Then how do we stop it? I don't think we can. Not completely. But we can continue to adapt, continue to verify, continue to use human intuition as a check against technical authentication. The machines can be fooled. But the human instinct for what sounds right and what sounds wrong, that's harder to deceive. Alpha Company made it through the operation with 0 casualties, thanks entirely to Park's vigilance and the protocols they'd established. But the experience had changed everyone who'd participated. They'd fought an invisible enemy, an entity that existed in electromagnetic frequencies, that weaponized the voices of the dead against the living. Back at base, Dr. Chen compiled a full report of the incident. This represents a new phase in the signal eater's evolution. It's no longer just passively collecting corrupted spirits. It's actively hunting, strategizing, learning, and it's focused specifically on radio operators who've become aware of it. You're on its target list now, Park. What does that mean? It means you'll never have normal radio communications again. Every transmission you hear, you'll have to question. Every voice could be real, or could be the signal eater trying to manipulate you. It's psychological warfare on a level we've never seen before. Park felt the weight of that reality settling over him. His entire career was radio operations. It was what he was trained for, what he was good at. And now that profession had been poisoned by the knowledge that the equipment he relied on was compromised by something inhuman. Is there any way to defeat it? Permanently? Dr. Chen shook her head. We've been studying this phenomenon for decades, across multiple conflicts. The signal eater, or entities like it, have existed for as long as humans have been using electromagnetic communications in warfare. Telegraph operators in the Civil War reported mysterious messages from the dead. Radio operators in World War I heard phantom transmissions. Every war, every conflict, it gets stronger. More dead to corrupt, more frequencies to inhabit, more ways to reach the living. So we're just supposed to live with it. Except that our communications are compromised by hostile spirits. We adapt. We develop better protocols, better verification methods, better training for operators. We spread awareness so more people know what they're dealing with. And we support the resistant spirits, the soldiers who are still fighting even in death, who are trying to protect us. That night, Park couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Sergeant Brennan, Captain Wright, and all the others trapped in that liminal space between life and death, fighting a never-ending war against something that wanted to consume them. They'd sacrificed everything in life, and now they were sacrificing their rest in death, all to protect soldiers they'd never met. He went to the communications tent and set up his radio on the spirit frequency, the one Dr. Chen had established for contact with the helpful dead. This is Technical Sergeant Daniel Park. If any of the resistant spirits can hear me, I want to talk." Captain Wright's voice came through, warm and familiar now. "We hear you, Park. What's on your mind?" "I want to understand. You're dead. You've earned your rest. Why are you still fighting? Why not just let go? Move on to whatever comes next?" "Because we're soldiers, Park. That doesn't stop when we die. We took an oath to defend, to protect, to serve. Death doesn't absolve us of that oath. And honestly, this is our war now. The wars of the living, those eventually end. But this war against the signal eater, against the thing that wants to corrupt and control the dead to harm the living, this war is eternal. Someone has to fight it. But at what cost? You're trapped. You can't move on. You're stuck in this existence, fighting forever. We're stuck anyway. The signal eater won't let us move on. It wants to absorb us, use us, so we might as well fight while we can. And besides, every soldier we save, every warning we deliver, every trap we help you avoid, that's a victory. That matters. That gives our deaths meaning beyond just being casualties." Park felt tears running down his face, though he wasn't sure why. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry you have to keep fighting. I'm sorry we couldn't save you when you were alive. Don't apologize, Park. You're doing what we couldn't. You're surviving. You're going home someday. When you do, remember us. Tell people about us. Not the official story about signal anomalies and combat stress. The real story. That we're still here, still serving, still protecting. That's all we ask." Over the following months, Park became something of a specialist in phantom transmissions. He trained other operators, helped establish protocols across multiple units, worked with Dr. Chen to develop better methods for distinguishing authentic from corrupted signals. The military never officially acknowledged the phenomenon, but unofficially, radio operators knew. They whispered about it, shared stories, learned the verification techniques. Park's tour ended, and he rotated home. He left the Rangers, left active duty, but he couldn't leave the radio. He got a job as a communications specialist contractor, working with military and emergency services. And everywhere he went, he heard them. The phantom transmissions, the dead soldiers still trying to help, still warning of danger, still fighting their eternal war. He started a blog, anonymously at first, documenting encounters with the phenomenon. He called it the ghost frequency, and used it to share verification protocols, to warn other operators, to tell the stories of soldiers like Captain Wright and Sergeant Brennan, who were still serving even in death. The blog gained a following, mostly from military radio operators who'd had their own experiences. They shared their stories, their techniques, their warnings. A community formed, people who understood that the electromagnetic spectrum was haunted, that the dead could speak if you knew how to listen, and that some of those dead were still trying to protect the living. 5 years after his deployment to Afghanistan, Park received a package at his home. No return address, no note. Inside was a military radio, an older model from the 1970s Vietnam era. He recognized it as the type that would have been used by soldiers in that conflict. He set it up, tuned it to the old tactical frequencies, and listened. At first, just static. Then, gradually, voices emerged. Not the helpful dead he'd grown accustomed to, but something else. Older voices, speaking in the terminology and accents of a different era. "Is anyone listening? This is Firebase Delta. We've been under siege for I don't know how long. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't work right here. We need extraction. We need help. Is anyone out there?" Park recognized the pattern. These were Vietnam soldiers, trapped in the same liminal space as the Afghanistan and Iraq veterans, caught at the moment of their deaths and unable to move forward. How many were there? Across how many conflicts? How far back did this phenomenon go? He started to respond, to offer what help he could, when another voice cut in. The signal eater's voice, that terrible polyphonic chorus of thousands of corrupted dead. "Park, we told you to stop interfering. We warned you. And yet, you continue. You spread knowledge. You teach resistance. You support the enemy dead. This cannot continue. What are you going to do about it? I'm home now. I'm a civilian. You can't touch me here." Can't we? You still use radios, Park. You still listen to the frequencies. And we are everywhere that electromagnetic signals exist, not just in combat zones. Everywhere. Police radios, emergency services, amateur radio enthusiasts, even civilian communications. Anywhere someone dies while using a radio, we can potentially corrupt them, add them to our ranks, use them to harm the living. The realization hit Park like a physical blow. The signal eater wasn't just a military problem, it was a civilian problem too. Anywhere there were radios and violent deaths, it could establish a presence. Why are you telling me this? Because we want you to understand the futility of resistance. You can't stop us. You can warn people, you can teach them to verify transmissions, but eventually they'll make mistakes. Eventually they'll trust the wrong voice, and when they do, people will die, and some of those people will join us. The cycle continues. We grow stronger. Resistance becomes harder. Eventually, we will be strong enough to manifest physically. And then there will be no more hiding in frequencies. We will walk among the living. We will be the living. Everyone will serve. Park shut off the radio, unplugged it, locked it away. But he could still hear the signal eater's voice in his mind, that terrible promise of inevitable corruption and control. He'd thought he was done with this war when he left Afghanistan, but the war had followed him home, and it would never end. He continued his blog, continued spreading awareness, continued trying to help. But he also started preparing for what he now believed was inevitable. The day when the signal eater would cross over fully, when it would manifest in the physical world with an army of corrupted spirits at its command. He reached out to others who'd encountered the phenomenon. Radio operators, researchers, paranormal investigators. Together, they formed an informal network, sharing information, developing countermeasures, trying to stay ahead of the entity's evolution. Dr. Chen became a close colleague, working with Park to document the phenomenon and develop new verification protocols. "The signal eater is learning faster than we can adapt," she told him during one of their meetings. "Every countermeasure we develop, it eventually overcomes. Every verification technique we teach, it eventually learns to fake. We're in an arms race against something that has infinite patience and increasing intelligence. So, what do? We keep fighting, same as the resistant spirits. Because what else can we do? Give up? Let it win. That's not an option. As long as there are people willing to fight, willing to resist, willing to protect others, we have a chance." 10 years after his first encounter with phantom transmissions, Park received a call from an old friend. Walsh. She'd stayed in the military, made it to Command Sergeant Major, was now overseeing communications training for the entire Army. "Park, we need your help. Officially. The military is finally acknowledging the phenomenon, at least at classified levels. They want to establish a dedicated unit to deal with it. Radio operators specifically trained to handle phantom transmissions, to coordinate with the resistant spirits, to combat the signal eater, and they want you to help train them." The military doesn't want to hear what I have to say. They've spent a decade denying this exists. That was before. Things have changed. There have been too many incidents, too many casualties that can be directly traced to following corrupted transmissions. The cost of denial is too high. They're ready to listen now. Park agreed to help, though he had no illusions about the challenge ahead. Training soldiers to communicate with the dead, to distinguish helpful spirits from hostile entities, to navigate the electromagnetic spectrum while under psychological attack from something inhuman, it wasn't going to be easy. But it was necessary. Because the signal eater was real, it was growing stronger, and it wasn't going away. The only question was whether humanity could adapt fast enough to survive its evolution. The Ghost Frequency blog is still active today. If you know where to look, you can find it. Read the stories, learn the verification protocols. Radio operators around the world contribute to it, sharing their encounters with phantom transmissions, their techniques for distinguishing real from fake, their experiences coordinating with the resistant dead. Captain Wright is still there, still leading the fight from beyond death. Sergeant Brennan is still there, still warning of danger. Hundreds, maybe thousands of dead soldiers are still serving, still protecting, still fighting the eternal war against the Signal Eater. And the Signal Eater is still growing, still learning, still corrupting new spirits, and preparing for the day when it will be strong enough to manifest physically. That day is coming. Maybe soon. Maybe not for years. But it's coming. Park is still training operators, still spreading knowledge, still preparing for what he believes is inevitable. He's in his 50s now, gray-haired and tired, but still committed to the fight. Because someone has to be. Someone has to remember that the electromagnetic spectrum is haunted, that the dead can speak, and that some of those dead are still serving. If you're a radio operator, military or civilian, remember this. Verify everything. Authenticate every transmission. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Ask questions that require human emotion and memory to answer. And if you hear voices claiming to be the dead, listen carefully. Some of them are trying to help. Some of them are trying to harm. And knowing the difference might save your life. Reports of phantom radio transmissions date back to the earliest days of military radio use. World War I operators reported hearing voices of dead soldiers on the frequencies. World War II aviators spoke of the Foo Fighters and mysterious radio signals from nowhere. Vietnam veterans documented hundreds of incidents of unexplained communications. Modern conflicts continue to produce similar reports. Operators hear call signs from units that no longer exist, receive tactical advice from soldiers confirmed dead, intercept conversations that seem to be from different time periods. The military generally attributes these to signal propagation anomalies, atmospheric conditions, or equipment malfunction. But the reports persist, and they're remarkably consistent across different eras, different technologies, different theaters of operation. Always the same pattern. Voices of the dead, trying to communicate, trying to warn, trying to help, and sometimes trying to harm. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, the reality is that electromagnetic signals don't die. Every radio transmission ever made is still out there, propagating through space, forever. And if consciousness can somehow imprint itself on those signals, if the moment of death can create a lasting resonance in the electromagnetic spectrum, then maybe the dead really are still talking to us. Maybe they're still trying to serve, still trying to protect, still fighting their war. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real military encounters with the unexplained. Share this with anyone who uses radios, anyone who might need to know about the verification protocols, anyone who should understand that the frequencies are not always safe. And if you're a radio operator who's heard voices you can't explain, who's received transmissions from call signs that shouldn't exist, who's felt that chill when a dead soldier's voice comes through clear and strong to warn you of danger, you're not crazy. You're not alone. Others have heard them too, and some of us are working to help them, to support their eternal mission, to make sure their sacrifice continues to matter. Until next time, verify your transmissions. Trust your instincts, and remember, not all the voices on the radio are from the living, but some of them are still trying to save your life. This has been the Smoke Pit. Honor the dead, protect the living, and never stop listening.